Tonight on Alaska's news source, the Anchorage School District and the union say they've reached a tentative contract agreement. A few things it includes and what's ahead next. Plus, after days of dangerous weather conditions, we check in on the roads in Anchorage.
And speaking of roads, please use caution as you drive as remaining storm impacts stick around through the weekend.
You're watching Alaska's news source.
A tentative agreement has been reached by the Anchorage School District and the Anchorage Education Association. That's according to a joint statement ASD sent out. Based on that statement, the agreement would include a 3-year contract that runs from July 1st of this year to the end of June 2029. The statement says the contract would include a salary increase, an increase to the employer health contribution, as well as other things. A ratification vote is expected later this month, according to the statement. If approved, the Anchorage School Board would then consider it at a meeting in early February. We have comment from an ASD as well as AEA on our website. And after days of difficult weather, Charlie Fellows went around Anchorage to check out the roads today and talked with a man visiting about what he experienced.
Here at Beluga Point along the Seward Highway, conditions seem to have improved. Based on what I've seen driving around the city of Anchorage and down to here Saturday, roads much less icy, much less slippery compared to the chaos that we saw and covered extensively Friday with cars sliding off the road, colliding, standing water on the roads. Today, much less of that.
It was nice once I was on the highway here. So this is pretty clear. I like this. Very steady, very clean. Once I got out of the city a little bit, yeah.
Still, APD warning drivers to be extremely cautious, especially here on the Seward Highway, where they say conditions could get worse as the wintry mix that we've been seeing around the Anchorage area for the last couple days continues. Charlie Fellows, Alaska's news source.
The Anchorage Police Department says as about 4 this afternoon, there's been 20 vehicle in distress calls since midnight, as well as 8 crashes with injuries and 14 without. Stormy conditions have subsided across the state. However, lingering hazards still remain. Meteorologist Bailey Braun joins us now to tell us what to expect this weekend.
Thank you, Michaela. Well, as Charlie had mentioned, even though the roads are starting to look a little bit more clear, you should absolutely still use caution on these roads, especially if you're traveling north along the Glen Highway or the Parks Highway, and especially as you travel down more south on the Seward Highway. Now, all across the state, I want to point out that yesterday, we were going to have several blizzard warnings and winter weather advisories for Fairbanks in the interior. However, now today, all of them actually have been canceled and they have also expired. So impacts into the interior are much less significant than what we were expecting. However, we still have those impacts moving into Nome and the Seward Peninsula with that blizzard warning expiring at 9 p.m. today. And for Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula, that winter weather advisory will still be ongoing from 9 p.m. tonight to 9 a.m. tomorrow. This is mostly due to these slick roads and that potential for this overnight light ice glaze, as well as that light snow accumulation, if any. So again, the biggest impact for Western Alaska is going to be that blizzard warning in the Seward Peninsula. This is mostly for these gusting winds up to 30 miles per hour so far in Nome, but even up to 50 miles per hour in St. Paul Island. So brace for these strong winds as this could add to that reduced visibility. But the biggest impact along, again, these highways and for South Central is going to be this driving. So make sure that you clear off your cars of any snow and ice, especially from your windshields before you drive. And make sure you give yourself extra time when you head out the door. Both give yourself time for that increasing and following distance, but also make sure you give yourself time on the roads. Don't rush anywhere. It's not NASCAR, and you're not going to beat anybody if you head to work early or if it's the weekend, heading out to whatever restaurant you want. Just make sure that you're driving careful and make sure you slow down. Now, another impact from the storm that we had the last couple of days is the avalanche warning. We still have very high avalanche risk and danger all across the Chugach Range and for South Central in general. So overnight tonight, these lows are going to fall below freezing, but tomorrow you're going to experience that thaw-freeze pattern, which adds to that slickness on the roads.
Bailey, you put it one good way. It's not NASCAR. Stay safe out there. 2 people were taken to the hospital yesterday in what police are calling a stabbing investigation at an Anchorage hotel. The Anchorage Police Department says they were called just after 3 p.m. yesterday to the Residence Inn Marriott in the Rogers Park area of the city. The call was in reference to a disturbance, and APD says officers found a man and a woman who each had been stabbed at least once. Both were taken to the hospital with what APD described as life-threatening injuries. APD says all parties involved have been contacted, and the situation is under investigation. And this summer, Fairbanks will need to find a new place to celebrate Juneteenth, as Bernice Aldridge Park has been named one of 2 parks that will see renovations. In case you missed it, the park has hosted Juneteenth celebrations for Fairbanks for several years and is also a staple of older Fairbanks neighborhoods. But this summer, improvements will begin as part of the Capital Improvements Program. Renovations will include new playground equipment, bathrooms, improved walkways, and a sledding hill.
I've learned a lot about her compassion for kids, bringing them in, keeping them off the street, getting them out of trouble, making sure they have a place that's safe and enjoyable for families and for kids throughout her life. And that was really the legacy she left for this community. So making sure the park reflects that and is a vision of what the family generations later wants to keep seeing was really important that we were true and faithful to.
Hopkins says the borough is working with the Fairbanks chapter and AACP to find a new place to celebrate Juneteenth this summer. The goal is to celebrate the holiday after the renovations are complete in 2027. Still ahead, people gather giving their opinion against what they're afraid the U.S. could do with Greenland. And President Trump explains why he wants to buy the country as he's imposing tariffs on some nations displaying their support for Greenland.
You're watching Alaska's news source.
About a dozen people were downtown today demonstrating against the idea that the U.S. could create military action against Greenland. This comes as President Donald Trump is upping the pressure on European nations in his pursuit of Greenland. Announcing today he'll be imposing tariffs on them, Washington correspondent Katrin Asaf explains.
President Donald Trump announced Saturday he will implement a 10% tariff on imports from several European nations beginning February 1st, as he ups the pressure on Denmark to sell Greenland to the U.S. Trump, who's been eyeing the North Atlantic Danish territory since his first term, has been fixated on acquiring Greenland since retaking office almost 1 year ago. In response, several European nations sent troops to the island. Trump responded Friday, threatening potential tariffs. Then Saturday, he announced in a Truth Social post the U.S. will be putting the 10% tax on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland, all NATO allies. He said the tariff rate is set to rise to 25% if Denmark does not make a deal to sell Greenland to the U.S. by June 1st. Lawmakers were quick to respond, including Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon, who called the pressure campaign foolish. Once implemented, the tariffs will tax goods imported into the U.S. from those countries. Companies often pass the cost of the tariff onto the consumer. In Washington, I'm Katrin Asaf.
There are questions about whether the proposed tariffs are legal. The Supreme Court is set to rule on whether the president has broad authority to implement tariffs. The case dates back to Trump Liberation Day tariffs he announced last April. And this week, the president and the White House secretary explained the idea behind the push for Greenland.
Greenland is very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. You found that out last week with Venezuela. There's everything we can do about things such as that. Not going to happen. We're not, I can't rely on Denmark being able to fend themselves off.
So this is a conversation the administration intends to keep having with the Danes and with the respected delegation from Greenland. But the president has made his priority quite clear. He wants the United States to acquire Greenland. He thinks it's in our best national security to do that.
And looking now at that demonstration in Anchorage today that we mentioned, about a dozen people gathered in front of the Peterson Tower on L Street with signs and slogans in opposition of the idea of military action against Greenland, which is an autonomous territory of Denmark. The organizer saying Greenland should be off the table.
I just think it's really important for the people of the United States to let our representatives know that we do not support any kind of military action against Greenland or NATO ally Denmark. Denmark has been an incredible ally to the United States since the very beginning of the Cold War. There's no reason for us to be belligerent towards our allies.
Similar demonstrations were held in other places today, including Greenland and Denmark.
Thanks for listening. Click subscribe so you can get the latest podcast from Alaska's news source automatically. And stay up to date with breaking news and in-depth reporting available for free 24/7 with the Alaska's news source app.